Welcome to the latest edition of the Giants Huddle podcast, presented by Citizens, the official bank of the New York Giants. Tommy Devito has taken not only the New York, New Jersey metropolitan area by storm, but the nation as well after his Monday night performance against the Packers, as the Giants are riding a 3-game winning streak. So let's dig deeper into the Tommy Devito story. We're now joined by a man who has trained him since he was 6 years old. He's the owner of Clarke Sports, serves as a private QB coach, who's trained signal callers on various levels over the past 2 decades, none other than Leon Clarke. Leon, you got Lance Medow here on Giants.com. Greatly appreciate the time. Hope all is well. How's everything on your end?
Everything is great. I just have running around trying to get here and just find a quiet space in the building just so I can do this. So everything seems to be good right now. So awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Not a problem. My pleasure. I appreciate you juggling multiple things around this time of the year. And this has been, Leon, let's start off, some week for you, because you also work, if I have my facts correct, with Titans quarterback Will Levis, who led that great comeback against the Miami Dolphins on Monday Night Football, while simultaneously Tommy DeVito putting on a show in East Rutherford, New Jersey. So from a personal standpoint, what have the last few days been like for you?
It's been great. Tommy and both Will are very professional. They're hard workers. They were working together back, I want to say maybe 2016 at the time when Tommy was going into the Elite 11. And they spent a great deal of time working with each other. And, to see them playing at that level, and producing, and it's a testament to their hard work. And it's not a wonder to me at all.
So, Leon, let's go back in the day. From what I understand, Tommy DeVito is 6 years old. His father tracks you down and says, I need you to train my son. Part one of my question is, how rare is it for you to be working with a 6-year-old? And what was your initial reaction when someone that young wanted already to be molded into a quarterback?
Initially, most people don't know this, but when I first met Tommy and his father, he actually came in to learn how to run. Tommy wasn't the most, he wasn't the most fastest kid, or he didn't have the greatest running form. And it was really just getting him to just be a better athlete. He always had the ability to throw the ball. At the time, he actually never played quarterback. He didn't even go out for the youth football team. And it was over that time we built a great relationship. And one day I remember his father saying to me, he was like, hey, I really want Tommy to go out and play football. I want him to go out for the quarterback position. We were talking. I said, look, I'll train him. He's like, yeah, you can train him. I said, yeah, let's go. Let's train him. So it was unique because, at the time I was training quarterbacks, but I've never trained a 6-year-old before, right? So you can imagine a kid who's 6, right? He doesn't know what to expect, right? He doesn't know the ins, the outs, the rules of the game. So it was a lot that was put into Tommy, and I got to say that it was a long road and journey to get there.
How much, though, when you're working with him at 6, do you see the raw talent that you can essentially mold into somebody that at that point or down the road can be a productive signal caller?
You know what? I think that's where development comes into play. I always say I'm not a cherry picker. I'm one who likes to do the work. And like I said, Tommy was unique because I felt like here was a kid that no one had touched. I could mold him, right? And, I'm a dreamer as well. And in my mind, Tommy is like my son, and I want to give him the best. So it was really building his base, the lower half, getting him to understand coverage. And, I remember his dad saying to me, he came and he was watching the training sessions, like, he's in wing T offense. Why is he teaching him to look off coverage and move safeties and do all that stuff? But I knew if I was behind this one day where he could be. I wasn't worried about his size. I wasn't worried him. He would get to where he is today.
Well, on that topic, since it is rare that you mentioned that you work with a 6-year-old, when you look back, how beneficial, Leon, was it that you got your hands on somebody like Tommy DeVito that early in the process to start teaching him about principles that normally maybe you don't discuss with somebody until they're in middle school or high school?
Right. Well, at that age, being 6 years old, there's a lot of information. You're talking about my knowledge and what I had in trying to comprise and put all that together for a 6-year-old. So a lot of it was just piecemeal. It was, overtime, getting him to just, be able to do the little things, right? And I remember saying to his dad, I said, he's going to be so technically sound that he'll be able to play in any offense. And that was kind of the whole premise of this, was like, learn the little things, right? A lot of people always talk about Tommy's quick release, his fast release, and that was something that's a trademark of what we do, just really getting him to be compact, getting his shoulders and his hips square to the target, being able to finish the throw with his wrist. He's a big time, when it comes to the wrist, he uses the wrist. He's really able to generate that velocity. And so all these things took time. It didn't happen in one day. And it was important to make sure that he was spoon-fed in this manner because, a lot of times parents want immediate success, right? They want to see, a return on the investment, right? And so for Tommy, it was very innocent and it allowed him to grow and for us to grow together, along the way.
From what I understand, he was also a passionate baseball player at a very young age and continued to play. And as you can attest to, there's a very different skill set throwing motion for a baseball player versus a quarterback. How did you walk that fine line as he tried to balance both sports?
So one of the things we had talked about over time was, we knew by the time he got to Cooperstown, that was going to be it for him, right? And it was just like, look, because listen, I was doing the work and it's kind of like, dad will take him off, break it. All right, Leon, fix it, right? And it was just constant and back and forth. I'm like, look, man, this is just too much, But I can tell you that in that time, in that process, it was really about saying, okay, what are we going to do for the future, right? Is he playing baseball or is he playing football, right? He's going to have to commit to one. And a lot of what was the standard in teaching of just throwing the football, for me, it was different, teaching him to throw in a different manner, right? Not using baseball mechanics and trying to merge that in with what he was doing in football. And so from year to year, it was constant. Like I said, it was that back and forth until he got to the 5th grade. And it was just like, okay, that's it. We're just going to focus on football. And that allowed me to just have more consistency with him, building in the off season up to the point where we got him ready for the season.
I'm glad you brought up the dynamics of your working relationship with him because he went on to Don Bosco Prep, then Syracuse, Illinois, now with the Giants. What's been your level of communication, Leon, along the way? Because you have a very unique position where you're his private quarterback coach, but he also has a quarterback coach on his team, a head coach, an offensive coordinator, and you basically have to find your lane. So how does that operation work?
Simple. Tommy knows I love him. And I always say, you know what? I'm not out there with you in the flesh, but I'm out there with you, right? And I always say, when you see him, you see me, and vice versa. And I think, when you're in that situation as a private quarterback coach, you have to understand that, the terminology and what they use with a quarterback coach, let's just say Syracuse, Illinois, may not be the same thing you use. But nonetheless, you don't try to overstep what they're teaching them. You just try to fine tune the thing so it works best for the team. And as I said, the biggest thing that, coaches have praised me on is that Tommy has always been well coached. And that's something that I pride myself in. And I look at Tommy and I think about just the adjustments he's made going from high school, Don Bosco, at the time. Greg Toll was there. Tommy gave Toll his last championship, right? And just taking Tommy because even before then, he was playing for Cedar Grove youth football team. And I knew, hey, look, if we're going to make this jump and go to Don Bosco, he needs some time to develop in a Pop Warner league that's going to have athletes similar to what's going to be at Bosco. So then he left Cedar Grove and went to the Montclair Cobras, and that allowed him to play with those better athletes, right? Athletes that had aspirations to play at a Don Bosco, Prims Catholic, and so forth. And then at that time, once he got there at Bosco, he fit in very well. He was always a hard worker. It wasn't new to him. He gelled with his teammates. And then we took him from and again, a lot of work has gone into this. We took him from that point and got him into the Elite 11. And a lot of those guys, I know Trent, I know Brian, and they were able to evaluate him the way I wanted him to be evaluated. And he became an All-American, and it was actually my second time out at Oregon because the year prior I had Jared Garantano, and I'd worked with him also. He was another kid that was at the academy. And so now I was back again for a second tour. And Tommy just had a wealth of knowledge and information from me being there the previous year. And then from there, he went out, he did his thing. And then we came back and, we made some calls and we got him into the All-American game. So I've been there at every stage, of his development. And he's, like I said, he's had a tremendous success. And I think that it just shows that when you have a quarterback coach who does it the right way, it can work well for teams, whether it's high school, whether it's college, or whether it's the pros.
You're ready for a change. Payday comes early with Citizens, so go to that retreat. New You moves to the country. Now you're raising goats and launching a lifestyle brand. Are you ready for all that life brings?
The Huddle is brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the New York Giants. From game day to every day, Citizens is made ready for Giants fans with insights, guidance, and solutions. Learn more at citizensbank.com. So how much, Leon, interaction-wise, though, do you have with those coaches so that you know what to focus on with him during the offseason? So, for example, would you talk with Mike Teal, who was his offensive coordinator, former NFL quarterback at Don Bosco, the Syracuse coaching staff, or even the Giants coaching staff now as he gets into the offseason? Because, because of the CBA rules, they're limited in terms of what level of interaction they could have with him.
Correct. So, I would have Zooms with Dino. He and I would talk. Most of that focus was placed on trying to implement more of a pro-style friendly offense for Tommy. At the time, Tommy was doing very well, in particular in 2019. He threw 19 touchdown passes, 5 interceptions. And so a lot of that was getting him ready and just trying to find the personnel that could fit his abilities. And so I remember his final year at Syracuse when they decided to go with Schrader and Tommy was there. Back to your question, I advised him to leave. And one of the things about that was I knew that based on what the direction they were going, it wouldn't have fit his skill set. But like anybody would, or for a friend or a son or a father, you want to make sure that if I'm going to make that call to say, hey, you need to leave, I need to make sure I have a place for you. So, I knew some people around and I reached out to a buddy, and I had to be careful myself because he hadn't put himself in the transfer portal at that time. So I reached out to a buddy and he actually knew who I was talking about. And he said, man, we'd love to have him. And I just said, hey, what's your personnel? He said, hey, we're 11, we're 12. And I said, all right, okay. All right, how's your running backs? And he said, look, we got 2 pro-style running backs. And I said, this is great because at that time, Tommy was taking a beating at Syracuse. No knock to them. It's just part of the game, right? And I said, this would be great for him to actually run the play actions, the things he's been doing since he's been young, right? And get back to those basics and allow him an opportunity to be able to be productive. And, I did my homework on Brett. I knew some people who knew him, and they were just telling me it. And I looked at his resume, saw he was with the Giants and with the Patriots, and I said, this was perfect, right? And going back to the beginning, the plan was, hey, look, you're a local kid. You got 5 teams here. You'll get a shot, right? Even if you don't get drafted. So I think everything worked out well for Tommy.
And, of course, Leon's talking about Brett Bielema for our listeners and viewers to understand, head coach at Illinois, who was previously here with the Giants. How much, Leon, of what you just laid out is essentially when it comes to the quarterback, as much as we can sit here and analyze skill set, features, characteristics, it really comes down to environment and how that has been such a big part of Tommy's storyline, as you just talked about finding the right college and even with the Giants deciding to go to them as an undrafted free agent.
Right. Well, one of the things prior to meeting Brett, I remember Tommy, his father and I, we were talking, and he said, what should I ask him? And I said to him, first thing you ask him is, what do you see in my son? And he said, that's a great question, right? So when, Brett's sitting there, the offensive line coach here, Tommy's father's here, I'm in the middle, and Tommy's next to me, and he poses the question. He says, "Hey, what do you see?" And Brett just had a very good answer. He got straight to the point. He talked about Tommy. He talked about his ability. And I looked at Tommy, and I just gave him the headline, like, this dude knows what he's talking about, right? This is a good fit. So I think Tommy had to buy in. One of the things is I always say, I will help you, but I looked at Tommy and say, I will not make the decision for you. I'm always here, but I will not make that decision. You have to make it. I'll give you options. I'll do my best, but you have to make the decision. And I think he made the right decision. But back to that environment, again, I knew being around a coach like Brett Bielema, he had the level of experience of being in the pros. He knew what it was like. He knew the success. He knew the failures. One of the things I looked at Coach when he sat across from me and he was talking, so I said, "So you coach situational football?" And he said, "Leon, exactly right, situational football." And that was huge because Tommy didn't have much experience with situational football when he was at Syracuse. And that allowed him to really grow and grab the depth of knowledge and wealth that I think that's helping him now with the New York Giants.
I want to piggyback off of your last point in terms of where he's grown the most, because from what I've read, Mike Teal, who is a former NFL quarterback, had a pro-style offense at Don Bosco, and
Correct.
They gave him a lot of flexibility to make tweaks at the line of scrimmage. So how much has the mental side of things grown and reached new heights from the time he was in high school to now essentially what the Giants are asking him to do? And the mental side is maybe the most critical aspect of playing the quarterback position.
Right. Well, Mike did an excellent job. I remember I saw him on quite a few occasions at Don Bosco, and he was the first really to just, because as a private quarterback coach, I can script and I can try to do a lot of things, but at this end of the day, it's not fast football, right? And so Mike was able to see Tommy's ability and trust, like, hey, this guy can really play, and just have Tommy do some of the things that he was going to do and needed to do once he got to the next level. So Mike tremendously, he definitely played a part in Tommy's in his ability to gather that information, right? Play calls, going into the huddle. At Syracuse, it was no huddle, right? So there were some things that he wasn't familiar with. But in high school, Tommy was, they were a huddle team, right? So even now watching him with the Giants and seeing his progress and just from game to game, just watching how he gets in and out of the huddle, how he gets guys aligned, how is he going through his pre and post snap read, throwing the ball with efficiency, throwing the ball accurately on time. All these things play into the mental aspect of it. We talked about his quick release. Well, a lot of guys have elongated releases because they're trying to process what they see. If you watch Tommy, he's bing, 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 right? Because he sees it and he knows where he's going. And that was conversations I had with Dino Babers. He was like, "Leon, I have to tell Tommy sometimes, slow it down." He was like, "Leon, it's like he sees it before it's happening." And I just tell him that's just been his development, And so as long as Tommy continues to improve, you're just going to see him getting better mentally.
We're talking with Leon Clarke, Tommy DeVito's private QB coach, owner of Clarke Sports. He's been training QBs for well over 2 decades. I think what jumped out to me, Leon, about the game against the Packers Monday night, especially given how many sacks, not just Tommy has taken, but all Giants quarterbacks this season, 69. He didn't take 1 sack, and his legs played such a big role, it seemed, in terms of extending plays and putting pressure on the Green Bay defense. How much is that an indication of how much he's adjusted and evolved in a small period of time with the Giants in reading the defense and reacting to what you're talking about that needs to be processed so quickly?
Well, one of the things I'll add to that is, when you're coming in and you're not the starter, the team is not used to you. They're not used to your clock. You have a different clock than they do because they're starters, right? Everybody rallies around you. They kind of pull together and it's a little tight, right? Because they're just trying to make sure that they do their job, but also that you do your job. And I think that growth, again, you've watched him get better, and his team has allowed him to actually be who he is and play. And you can see everyone now is doing their job, which is awesome. But seeing him and recognizing the pressure, the stunts, and being able to keep his feet moving and extend the plays, right? And having that awareness. I tell my guys all the time, they're seeing 180, right? Don't get narrow in terms of their focus and their vision. See the field 180, know your peripherals are, know where your exits are. And so he's done a good job of being able to climb the pocket, move in some of those what I call safe zones, and just be able to get the ball out efficiently and accurately.
He also clearly has a very calm demeanor. Even though he's a local guy, it doesn't seem like he gets too high. He doesn't get too low. Where does that come from, Leon, and how critical is that when you're playing the quarterback position, really on any level?
I think it comes from starting from the beginning, the very beginning. He's confident because he's been doing it for so long, right? You know, who I am, I'm a perfectionist. So Tommy will tell you, like, look, Leon will have you do something 20, 30 times, the same exact thing, do it again, right? And that was much of the way he was groomed. It was like, look, you know, everyone's going to critique you. They're going to have something to say, but you be your critic. You critique yourself, right? Understand that at the end of the day, if it's not to your liking, you know, then it's not the best. And so Tommy really looks and goes about it in that way, in that professional manner that while he's out there and he's doing and he's when he's playing, he's really allowing himself to, you know, grow. Right. Sometimes you can stifle that growth, right, and be afraid to make the mistakes. Earlier on, it was kind of like, let him throw the ball, you know, and I don't think that, you know, that was done intentionally, but you have to be able to protect yourself, you know, and fans know sometimes they don't understand that, right? You make the wrong check, you know, the guy's not, you know, he's not covered, or a guy's coming through, you know, whether it's the A gap, B gap, you know, and now the quarterback's out, right? So there's a lot that I've seen with him. There's a lot that he's continuing to get better with. And we'll see how he finishes the rest of the season. But his mental preparation and what he's done so far has been impressive in a short time.
You love turf. You're good at it. So you start a turf biz. Business grows, your savings grow. Become the most celebrated name in turf. Are you ready for all that life brings?
Giants fans love a winner. It's why they love Citizens, named a 2022 Best Bank in the U.S. by The Banker. As the official bank of the Giants and sponsor of the Huddle, Citizens is made ready for Giants fans of Big Blue. Learn more at citizensbank.com. Leon, I want to circle back to that great dialogue that you had about sitting down with Illinois' coaching staff and advising his father and Tommy what you need to hear from the coaching staff. I'm curious. He went undrafted, which now when you look at what he's been doing, I guess is a bit surprising, but maybe an example that, of course, the draft is an inexact science that you can attest to. What was your level of dialogue and involvement when the draft passes? Now he has the choice to survey the field, look at offers about maybe guiding him towards the Giants or another team based on the feel and the environment.
It's kind of similar to when he went into the transfer portal, right? That was his first time really experiencing free agency, right? There are numerous teams that reached out to Tommy and said, hey, you know, we're interested in you, you know, Oregon, I think it was West Virginia. And like I said, I have a good network, and I reached out, and some of those teams fell off, right? And, you know, it was back to, hey, this is the one team. This is the team right here. And it worked out. I think sometimes, you know, it's not a lack of talent why you don't get drafted. Sometimes it's timing, right? If you go back to 2019, he threw 19 touchdown passes, 5 interceptions. You know, his draft grade would have been much higher than probably what it would have been, right, in 23. So, you know, I think opportunities sometimes come in the weirdest way. But, you know, how we see it now is that, you know, we don't cry over what wasn't. You know, we know that what we have now and we embrace that and we run with it, you know, and we meet the challenges that are there. And Tommy's done a good job of being a professional and accepting where he is right now.
I know you never hope that two quarterbacks in front of you get hurt as a teammate. You're never wishing for that to happen. But we can't overlook the fact that Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor did go down, and that presented the opportunity. I guess what I'm getting at is, Leon, when you think back, how much of a blessing in disguise was it that he ended up with the Giants? Not because he's a local guy, but because of the pathway that we're looking at right now. And also Brian Dable, his presence developing quarterbacks, working with Josh Allen. And Josh Allen wasn't a guy that came from a big-time program, came from Wyoming, had some accuracy issues, and look at what he became. I'm not saying Tommy and him are identical, but who he's around and what led to the ultimate opportunity to start turned out to be extremely beneficial in the long run.
Right. Well, I think the coaching staff there, I think they're doing an excellent job. Unfortunately, you have two guys that went down prior to Tommy coming in and getting the job. But it's important, again, to have that your coaches believe in you. And I think they do. And you saw that over the time. He's been with them since the spring. And so, even having his family there, having his friends around him, the community locally, and as well as abroad, some of his friends that he's played with around the country, really support him. That's momentum. That's what you want, right? When you're there, it's like, hey, I want a state championship here. What more could I ask for? It drives him. I think he's enthusiastic about the opportunity. And I think that as long as he can continue to, live where, right down the road and get access to the facility, I think that's going to do well for him because, he's a hard worker. I know he will spend a lot of time in that facility. So if he does leave late, his house is not too far. So that's great.
Hey, convenience is a big part of life. I think we could all attest to that. So I can't blame him under the circumstances. Now, you just brought up the family aspect, and they've become stars in their own right because of their presence and the tailgates and the Tommy Cutlets. What do you make of all of this, Leon? Because, if you know his father going back to when he was 6 years old, if anyone can perhaps read into the family dynamics, I think you're clearly well qualified to do that. So
I can tell you this. So Tommy doesn't say it, but he actually cooks. So Tommy does cook.
Really?
Wow. He would FaceTime me. He'd be in what is it, Wegmans or whatever the store is, the supermarket, and he'd be there buying fish or buying this and be like, all right, what do I get? How I'm going to cook it? How I'm going to do it? So Tommy he's a personality in himself, right? But I can tell you this, walking in that house, whether I use the little code to get in or I just go through the back door of the kitchen is and I walk in, it is real. There's always some chicken cutlets there. I kid you not. There's always some chicken cutlets right there. I don't eat meat anymore, but I used to dab in there and just grab a few myself. I'm more vegetarian based. So, but the family they're quality people. His brother, Max, I was a sponsor for his confirmation. And it's family. It's family. Anytime you go there, it's always a good time. It's never no. It's always yes. So, it's just great. It's just great for them. It's, to just see the work that Tommy and I putting together and seeing it come to fruition and trusting me, with their son. It's very important, right? You don't know, they don't know, and, you're going based on what I said, right? But now you see it and you're like, this guy's pretty good, right? So, everything worked out.
They must give you a hard time as a vegetarian if you pass on all of those meat opportunities and dishes, no?
Well, you know what? Whether it's TS Ma or some other local whatever, they'll do stuff like pasta or something for me or salad. Like Lexi is always with that. We got you the salad, we got you this. So, I'm the light eater out the bunch, but, it's always a good time. It's always festive when you go over there, and you're never short of a drink or two. So that's cool.
All right, so at least they cater to your needs, and they're open from that standpoint. That's good to hear. So here's the biggest question of all.
Right.
So we saw Monday Night Football, his father front and center with his agent. Where's the fedora, Leon?
Yes.
When's your upcoming appearance coming here? We got 4 games left. You got to capitalize and take advantage of it.
You know what? I'm sure I'll get to one. I'm sure everybody in the stands will probably recognize me at some point being with the family. I mean, they're, the fanfare is real, right? It's party, but it's good though. In the past, it wasn't always, something to smile about, and that in the ups and downs, Tommy had the injuries, he had the physical beatings, the mental, I remember being on the field with him and I looked at him and saying, aren't you tired? aren't you tired? Like, you know what I mean? Like, let's go. Like, let's just get to this next level. And he had just came home, and we were out there. We had some resistance band, and we're working on just being able to put pressure on that leg again. And he's just a fighter. So, when I see them enjoying themselves and celebrating the way they do, I'm not like that. That's not me. I'm more reserved, behind the scenes, you know what I mean? But, I let the work speak for itself. But, I however they choose to celebrate, God bless them.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point, Leon, and I want to add this to the conversation before I wrap up here. You talked about just now the adversity that he's had to deal with. He loses his starting job at Syracuse,
right.
The injuries, and the offensive line hasn't been smooth sailing for the Giants when he first took over the starting job. How much do you think that's prepared him for some of the challenges that have arisen this season and really keeps him even keel, because he knows you can't treat every week as if it's a huge accomplishment when next week, all of a sudden, the NFL could provide an instantaneous wake-up call?
I think that does prepare him. But more importantly, I think what it does allow him to do is trust his teammates. Going through adversity and knowing who's there for you, it's so important, right? Because, you'll have 10 people there, right? And it's great when it's great, right? But then it's like no one's coming, you're hurt, you're not getting the same phone calls, or the line there, and you're in one of those games where they're not blocking well, right? Are you getting up and, are you, jawing at the line and, tell them, do your job, do your assignment, or you're just the guy like, hey, you know what? It's okay. It's one of those days, right? So I think he's been well prepared for this, the adversity of it. And his teammates and all the coaches, and as well as, his parents watching him, go through that. At the end of the day, I didn't give birth to Tommy, you know what I mean? And so, as a mother and father, to watch him go through that and just see how those experiences have brought him where he is today and has helped him, I think it's allowed him to build that camaraderie and trust his teammates even more, despite what they go through. And I think the way they're playing now is because they know that, what? We lost Daniel Jones. We lost Tyrod Taylor. We got this young man. Injuries happen. You've had guys get injured and come back, but you've seen them pull and gel together. And that's important. That's what you want. And that's how you build a team. That's how you build a nucleus of guys that can help you win a championship.
And that's been extremely noticeable, what you just said. And as a quick follow-up, Leon, when you see what the team has done rallying around him, I'm with you. I mean, that's a big part of team bonding, team building. And, you just mentioned you're essentially a part of the Devito family because you go back to when he was 6 years old. You know his personality. I don't want to say it was surprising, but what's impressed you the most when you see a locker room that's gone through two quarterbacks very quickly? I mean, remember, we're only talking about 4 starts, Leon, that Tommy has made. Right. That quickly say, we buy into this guy. We believe in this guy, and we'll sacrifice our bodies for this guy. That's a very rare occurrence, I would say, in the game of football overall.
It's by default, but I will say that it's leadership, and that starts with Daboll. That starts with the head coach. It was his choice to, as well as the GM, to have Tommy on that roster. So I think it starts with them. They believed in him, right? And so now he's in there as the starter, and those guys have responded well to him. And I think this is why you haven't seen the guys disgruntled. You haven't seen the breakdowns in the locker room, is because they're a family, and coach has done a great job of keeping those guys together despite the injuries, right? They found a way to win games, right? And that says a lot about the coach, regardless of what anyone thinks about wins and losses. At the end of the day, it goes back to building that nucleus, right? And who's going to be here next year, who's not, and you know what? But it doesn't matter. We're here right now, and they're living in the moment, and so that's why they're winning. So you got to give it to them.
And it's quite the moment as Tommy DeVito and company taking the nation, not just the New York, New Jersey metropolitan area, by storm. He is Leon Clarke, Tommy DeVito's private QB coach, going back to when he was 6 years old, owner of Clarke Sports, and he's worked with a variety of different QBs for over 2 decades, including tight end signal caller Will Levis, who had himself 1 week as well. Leon, absolute blast. Greatly appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks so much for joining me.
All right, thank you. Have a great time.
You as well.
Day. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. This is the latest edition of the Giants Huddle podcast presented by Citizens, the official bank of the New York Giants. You can check it out on Giants.com, the mobile app, and your favorite podcast platforms.